So there's another 6 principles here for 12 total. And again, this is the information that the team was emailing, coordinating back and forth after they created the Agile Manifesto in that initial meeting in Utah in 2001. So, and principle 7 is the most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. And again, this ties into what you saw a little bit with the Agile Manifesto. The values is this: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It's almost like a restatement of it. And that's that if even in software development, it's that you have to kind of have this face-to-face conversation, not just within the development team, but also with the customer. And a lot of people think that the way to develop good software is to have a bunch of talented developers sit in cubicles with the 3 carpeted walls around them and just bang away in the machine solving problems. But that's really not a good, that's not sort of a good example of how you should be delivering software sort of in this modern age. Is that software is really much more creative and collaborative. Is that you're working with a group of other people that might know a little bit more about some things than you. And so you kind of have to have this face-to-face conversation as a way to bring out each other's creativity. And so sometimes with Agile teams or with Scrum teams or something like that, you'll see that some of the employees are remote, or employees will prefer to email each other even when they're sitting next to each other. And that actually is discouraged by this Agile Manifesto. And that to embrace a more Agile mindset, you have to be sort of willing to turn your chair around and have a quick impromptu meeting with the other software developers. And that you have to sort of get together for these quick impromptu meetings to kind of discuss the most creative ways to deliver the product. And so you shouldn't think of good software developers, no matter how talented they are, as ones that like to work in isolation. There are certainly software developers out there that like to do that, but those software developers don't necessarily work well on Agile teams. It's much better to have sort of a small team of people who have a generalized understanding of how to deliver software than it is to have one superstar software developer that's not interested in talking with anybody or collaborating with anybody, just sort of hammering away at their own tasks in a cube, but not really coordinating with anybody else. Because then if something happens to that person, if they go to another company or something like that, then you won't have the people there who could support the product that they sort of took the brunt of developing. And so, and to embrace an Agile mindset, you really want your team to always be working together to deliver the software together. That much of the emphasis is focused on the team. You want to sort of bring up you want to have a more competent team. You don't necessarily want to have 1 or 2 superheroes and a support system. You want to have the whole team kind of working together, delivering the software. As you'll see later, that's one of the big kind of metaphors or analogies that you see with Scrum, is that a Scrum team has the ball and then they work together to push it forward. It's not like American football where you necessarily have someone catch the ball and then run on their own. It's, the Scrum is like the entire team pushing together to move the ball forward. So that's kind of principle 7, this idea that you have to have a lot of face-to-face communication with the team. Now, principle 8 is Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. And so you'll see this a little bit later with Scrum. This is what the velocity is all about, is that you want your Agile teams to be predictable. You don't want them to necessarily be planned out. Because remember, in the earlier principles and in the values, your team is going to be constantly changing. They're going to be pivoting when they see new information. They're going to be figuring out new and better ways to deliver the product. That makes it very difficult to plan out everything that the product is going to do months or even years in advance. And so because you're going to be having this team that's going to be pivoting and you're going to be getting new information from the customer, it's very difficult to plan out exactly what your product is going to do. So instead, you need to be predictable. You need to be able to deliver small increments of the product at a predictable pace. And so with Scrum, that's typically every 2 weeks, and then you're delivering iteratively and you're building up the software at a predictable pace. And what that will do is that it'll help your customer not necessarily see everything that the product's going to do in 6 months or a year, but it'll help your customer see everything that you're developing every 2 weeks over time. And so that kind of predictability helps the team succeed when organizations are sort of uncomfortable with this idea that they're not going to be able to plan out what the product is going to look like in 6 months or a year. So remember, you're predicting, you're delivering at a predictable pace, and you're not focused on planning exactly what the product's going to do when it's released. Now in Principle 9, you have continuous attention to technical excellence, and good design enhances agility. And again, I think this probably comes a little bit from a book called Clean Code, where you're developing software that's high quality because you don't want your team to sort of have to go back and do lots of rework. And so remember, in Agile, you're constantly kind of developing based on what the customer what the customer sees is the most valuable. So you might be pivoting and making changes. And so you need to make sure that you don't have too much technical debt, which is software that doesn't quite work as well as it should, because then if you make a quick change, then either you're going to have to do one or two things. You're going to have to build on top of some software that might not be fully optimized, and so you're inheriting some more technical debt. Or you might have to tell the customer they have to wait until you can kind of fix up the software so that you can make these changes, in which case you're kind of not necessarily delivering the highest value software. Instead of delivering what the customer is asking for, you're asking them to wait so that you can kind of fix what's already there. And again, that's not sort of in line with the Agile mindset. Is you should be delivering small, incremental, or iterative releases of working software that's extremely well designed so that you can build on top of it and quickly pivot. So you want to look out to make sure that you're not inheriting too much technical debt. Now remember, as a software developer, as soon as you write software, that's not the most difficult part. The most difficult part is maintaining it. And so you're developing software, and that might be, a fairly difficult thing to do. But remember that every time you write something down, it probably means it's going to be maintained for years. And so if you're not writing high quality code, then it's going to make it much more difficult to embrace an Agile mindset. Now, Principle 10 is interesting because it's sort of, you'll see it a lot in different practices with different Agile frameworks. Simplicity, and this is the art of maximizing the work not done, is essential. And this is a key part of it, sort of ties in to delivering software in these smaller chunks, is that you're developing little bits of working software over time. But you also want to sort of embrace simplicity because again, every time you create some software, you're going to be maintaining it often for years or longer. And so you want to make sure that it's simple so that you can build on top of it. If you write sort of complex, convoluted software, if you're putting a huge amount of buttons or something like that you have to maintain over time, then it gets much more difficult to make quick changes because you're going to be increasing your technical debt. These are the different things that haven't been optimized in your code that some point you're going to have to go back and fix. And so that makes it more difficult to embrace an Agile mindset. And on top of it, you're not necessarily delivering the highest value software, like I said, because you'll be going back a lot and creating sprints or iterations to go back and fix what should have already been optimized and done. And so Agile teams should be looking for ways to produce sort of the simplest software that could possibly work. And in Scrum, you'll see this sort of as the minimum viable product increment, or a lot of times in Scrum, you might use user stories to break things down into simpler, smaller chunks. But this idea that complexity in software is always the best route is something that these developers in the Agile Manifesto pushed back on. That sometimes it's better to do something simple and well than it is to create something complex which has all the possible functions and features that you could ever want. So, and that ties in a little bit to Principle 11. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organized teams. And Again, self-organized, cross-functional teams, you'll see that in Scrum, are these small groups of people working together to try and come up with the how they're going to deliver the best possible product. And in Scrum, you'll see that is the what, the customer focuses on what they want delivered, and then the development team focuses on the how, the simplest, the best way to deliver that functionality. And sometimes you'll get sort of a little pushback back and forth. Sometimes the customer will want something that's valuable but very complex. And the team might sort of say, okay, well, there might be a much simpler way to do this that gets you 80% of the value you want, but we'll be able to do it in 2 sprints instead of 8. And it'll be much easier to maintain over 5 years or something like that. So these kind of architectural decisions, these technical decisions are best left to the team, to self-organized team, where you can get together, collaborate, remember individuals and interactions, and work together to come up with something elegant, that's simple, that's easy to maintain, and that will help your team embrace a more agile mindset. Now, the final principle is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes its behavior accordingly. And so a lot of times you'll see that in something called retrospectives, where the team actually gets together and decides how to improve its own development process. Now again, one of the key things to keep in mind with this 12th principle is it's not saying, hey, you should get together and do a post-mortem like you'll see in project management, where one figures out sort of what went wrong with the project or what went right with the project. Here the team is getting together and improving itself. It's figuring out how to improve its own process so it can work together better as a team. Because remember, so many of these principles rely on this self-organized cross-functional team, is that you want the team to sort of work together to deliver the best possible, simplest product with the highest customer value. And so if they run into different challenges in their processes, they should get together and decide what's the best way to improve their team's process. You know, this could be anything from training to coming up with a better continuous integration solution to figuring out how to get people to sit together. And this is, you know, some of these things are one of the Scrum Master will facilitate, which you'll see a little bit later since this is a Scrum Master course. And so you'll facilitate these meetings where the team gets together and decides on the best way to improve. And again, later on, you'll see a little bit more about retrospectives and how the team should get together and come up with these little ideas each sprint on how to improve their process. Okay, so now we have a quick question just to go over some of the things that we've covered already. Which of the following principles is not found in the Agile Manifesto? Welcome change requirements, respond to change over following a plan, delivering working software frequently, or deliver on time within your budget. So which of these do you think is not found in the Agile Manifesto? So the answer is D. The manifesto focuses on customer value, and it's not used for project management. And this can be a little tricky if you're a long-time project manager and you want to become a Scrum Master. Is that, remember, Agile doesn't really focus as much on delivering something within the scope and within a budget. Instead, you're focused completely on customer value. It's what the customer finds valuable. Now, if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense because you're always adapting to new information. So your product owner or your customer representative or whoever your customer is might make changes along the way. And so you're pivoting to take advantage of new information. And so that means that you can't really come up with a scope and a budget because you don't necessarily know everything that your product's going to do when you deliver it. And so you want to entirely focus on customer value.